Hello and welcome to a very special edition of VU Sports Wired. Cutler, Klein here alongside Max Schneider. Drew Sundaram has the afternoon off thanks to some internship conflicts, but we are here and we are ready to talk some Commodore hoops. Now you may be noticing that we have a different bit of attire on for this show, as it is Super Bowl week, and this is the worst possible Super Bowl matchup for us two New Yorkers here. So we're going to get into that in a little bit and why this Super Bowl is absolutely atrocious. But first, we have to get to the absolutely atrocious ending of Vanderbilt Commodores basketball game last night against the Kentucky Wildcats. An unbelievably tough loss for the Commodores, falling by just a couple points in Rupp Arena in Lexington. This was an absolute heartbreaker for Vanderbilt. They led for most of the game, pretty much the entire second half, and they just couldn't hold on in the very end, and yet another late, dumb foul costing Vanderbilt in a big game against a Wildcat school of all things. You know, and whenever Vanderbilt plays a team called the Wildcats, someone who has a really good game just makes a dumb foul in the end. That's just how these things go. So, Max, I wanted to ask you, just how typical is this loss for Vanderbilt? Because this seems like just the epitome of the way this season has gone.
Right, so I wouldn't say it's the epitome, actually, because I think that this game impressed me more so than almost any game this season. And I think Vanderbilt's been playing its best basketball as of late. So before we come down on them for the last minute, which is well-deserved, I want to give Bryce Drew a little bit of praise here. I was very harsh on Bryce Drew going into that the first game against Kentucky. I said that his team wouldn't play well in second halves. They couldn't defend the paint, and he really wasn't making any in-game adjustments or game planning well. So last night, he did that extremely well for the second time in a row against Kentucky. He really stopped Kentucky's bigs from dominating the game, and Kentucky, size-wise, is the biggest team in the SEC. So that's a huge feat for Vanderbilt, an undersized team. They rebounded very well, especially on the offensive boards, and created mismatches on defense. However, he said this at halftime, and he foreshadowed it yet again. This team plays 35 minutes of good basketball, and then I don't know what happens after that, but they go into a funk, and it's a completely different brand of basketball. You can see here the missed free throws. Roberson is an 88% free throw shooter. LeChance going into this game an 83% free throw shooter. Missed free throws at the end of games, and it's really hard to recover from stuff like that. I mean, when you talk about a small margin for error, Vanderbilt has a 14-point lead against Kentucky in the second half of a game at Rupp Arena. That's unheard of. Vanderbilt's 38-1 before this game at Rupp Arena. So to have that second half lead and to have a chance to win this game, you have to be able to capitalize on it, and they weren't able to do so again. And the 1 for 5 from the free throw line in the last minute and overtime highlights that even more. And you see here, failure to communicate on defense again, resulting in a layup for Quade Green, and then really a good shot by Peyton Willis in this last second. You don't expect to get that good of a look, but can't hit it, and it's hard to blame Willis for that. Just so many things transpired in the last minute and in overtime of this game that it seemed like it really wasn't destined to go Vanderbilt's way, but Bryce Drew has the pieces in line, which is why I'd say this wasn't the epitome of Vanderbilt's season, but it still has that same feeling of this is a game that they should have won, and they found a way to lose it.
I totally agree with that. There are a few things that really stood out to me about this game. First of all, like you said, the free throw shooting. Riley LeChance missed a big free throw in this game against Kentucky, like he did in their previous meeting, missing 3, and they were going 0 for 4 in the game. We didn't do the odds calculation on this one, but I have to imagine that's pretty astronomically low.
About 11% if he's 89.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. But, looking at the way this team played down the stretch, you have to make some free throws. It came down to that. The margin came down to just some of those missed free throws. If LeChance hit those 2 on the 1-and-1 and Roberson at least just hits that 1, it's game over. Secondly, the foul on Joe Toye, you saw it in the highlight reel there. It's hard to fault him for that because he's playing very aggressively, and it shouldn't take away from a phenomenal game that he's had. We've talked about Joe Toye's role on this team, and if he still has one, if he still deserves to have one. And after this game, I think there's no doubt that he deserves to be playing in this lineup because he played phenomenally. This was his best game of the year by far, and yet it's going to be marred by that foul in the final seconds of regulation, which is, he's going for a loose ball. His momentum carried him into the player. it's not like you can really blame him for that, but it's still not a great play to make at that time in the game. And lastly, it wasn't shown in this highlight reel, but there was an and one play, I think it was in overtime, that Kentucky was able to secure a three-point play. Saban Lee committed the foul. But if you watch the replay of it, and you can find this on Twitter, it's there. You see him drive into Lee and throw his arm into him a couple times, and Lee is just there with his arms up the entire time. He's not moving. He's moving, he's shuffling his feet, but he's not leaning into the guy. He just has his arms straight up. And they call a foul on him, and he makes the basket and gets the foul shot. To me, that's inexcusable down the stretch. Vanderbilt got called for 17 fouls and going into the latter moments of the half. I mean, it's ridiculous, the disparity in the calls there. And I think that's something that people are going to need to look at is the officials in the SEC and how they're calling these games, because quite honestly, that foul call is typical of the way Vanderbilt gets calls sometimes. I'm not saying there's some grand conspiracy against Vanderbilt to prevent them from winning. I'm just saying that call was abysmal and in a huge situation in the game. And you can't call that. There was hardly any contact. If there was any contact, it was initiated by the offensive player. You probably don't even call an offensive foul. They just let that play go. And to me, that play changed the dynamic of the game, and so did that other foul call.
Right. So first on the foul, completely agree. I think especially when you have a guy who's 6'1" guarding a guy who's 6'9", Saban Lee's doing all he possibly can to make a play on the ball without fouling. I mean, if you're going to tell a guy in Saban Lee that you can't play that kind of defense against a 6'9" small forward in Kevin Knox, then what is he supposed to do? Back up? Because there's really no way he's going to stop him without sliding his feet and keeping his arms up, and that's exactly what he did. And I think the officiating was pretty bad yesterday down the stretch, and it has been a lot this season. Riley LeChance picked up his fourth foul early in the second half. I did not think that one was a foul either, a similar push-off scenario. But having said that, this game, any play in overtime, I think you've missed the point once you get to overtime. Because Vanderbilt should have won this game in regulation. There's no need for this game to go into overtime. And frankly, Vanderbilt had no business blowing this game. Joe Toye's foul, while yes, his momentum carried into him, at some point you have to realize, okay, even when you're taking this free throw, there are 6 seconds left on the clock. So after there's a loose ball for a few seconds, Joe Toye, that foul is committed with 2 seconds left in the game. If you just step off the court and let Shai Gilgeous-Alexander catch that ball before the half-court line with 2 seconds left, he's not a good three-point shooter. He's going to have to throw up a deep three to try to win the game. But instead, another bailout foul, and you just know when Gilgeous-Alexander goes to the line that he has the poise to calmly swish both free throws, and that's something that Vanderbilt couldn't do. And so when you see down the stretch Vanderbilt continuously blowing these leads late, and then a game gets into overtime, you almost know that overtime's not going to go their way because all the momentum is stacked up with Kentucky, especially playing at home, making that comeback. That in a 5-minute game, Kentucky just has the better team. So they figure they're going to win that. So Vanderbilt, your chance to win that game was in regulation. They played decently in overtime and got a good look at the basket with Willis, but that game has to be over long before then if you're Vanderbilt.
Absolutely, and you mentioned that shot by Willis at the buzzer there. There was so much that had to happen to get to that point that it feels moot to talk about this. But Vanderbilt did have a timeout with 4 seconds left to inbound the ball. Willis did get a good look. That was probably one of the better looks they could have gotten. But if you take that timeout, you advance the ball to half court, you run a set play to LeChance or Roberson, and Willis was the hot hand in overtime, but Roberson and LeChance are still your best options on the floor to make a bucket from long range. How is that not an option? You're leaving a timeout on the floor. I understand he did end up getting a good look, but you're leaving something you're leaving something to be wondered. How do you not burn that timeout? You get to advance the ball. That's the best benefit, and you also probably get a possibly better look at the basket. And if the inbounds play doesn't work, if for some reason there's a mishap, then you still have the opportunity to foul with 4 seconds left. So I mean, there's no downside to the foul there or to the timeout there. I just don't understand why they didn't take it. Why nobody on the bench realized, hey, maybe with 4 seconds left, we should give ourselves a better chance to get a good look.
Yeah, I mean, so we talked about this earlier. I actually wouldn't have called the timeout. I know you would have, for a couple reasons. One is that Kentucky's defense, when they're able to set up, was able to stop Vanderbilt even before the half court so well that I think Vanderbilt would have struggled to bring up the ball and even inbound the ball. Secondly, they would have needed to get the ball past half court on the inbounds pass or running to be able to advance it in half court because of the college rules. So it would have been tough to advance it. And I don't have a problem with Peyton Willis taking that last shot, especially because Peyton Willis had all the points at overtime. He had just made 2 really tough threes before then. Riley had airballed a 3 before then. Saban Lee had airballed a 3 before then. So, I mean, they got the shot. They got a shot that was decent. Maybe it's not your ideal shot. It's a better look than they probably would have thought they had not calling a timeout. I have so much faith in Kentucky's defense when they're able to set up and have time to pressure the ball that I don't know if Vanderbilt would have necessarily gotten a better one with that. But like you said, at that point of the game, it's a moot point because this game should have been over earlier. Vanderbilt gave up an easy layup by failing to get back on defense the possession before that. If you're resorting to trying to run a play going the length of the court with 4 seconds left, with Peyton Willis taking a deep 3, then after having a 14-point lead in regulation, then you've lost your way somewhere.
Yeah. There's someone on Twitter who was tweeting me about the game and mentioned that he thought that, and I'm just going to preface this by saying this is a horribly wrong opinion, that this game came down to coaching and that the players had all the ability to win, but that Bryce Drew's coaching was the difference. And I think it was the exact opposite. I think that Bryce Drew coached a phenomenal game this time. The timeout or non-timeout aside in the final moments, which I still think that should have been a good option. I think Bryce Drew coached a really good game. You could see that in his substitutions and his very strategic subs, both in late in regulation and in overtime. He was putting the lineup on the floor that had the best opportunity to either get a stop on defense or to put up points on the offensive end. And he did an excellent job of that. And the way that the players executed their passing, when they had the ball late and they knew they were going to get fouled, they got the ball in their best free throw shooter's hands. They got the ball in Riley LeChance's hand and eventually in Jeff Roberson's hand. And they didn't make those free throws, but you gave yourselves the highest percentage chance at winning. So I think Bryce Drew actually coached a phenomenal game this time.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he was fantastic yesterday, and specifically with a few situations. I thought that obviously the team struggled to guard Gilgeous-Alexander. He's a 6'6" point guard with long arms. LeChance is a fairly unathletic point guard, and he's only 6'1", so that's a very tough matchup. So he tried to switch the matchups there. He played Toy a lot to guard Gilgeous-Alexander because that worked in Game 1. He purposely played guys off of Gilgeous-Alexander so that when they would set screens, they'd switch and they'd have the matchup that they like. I think that's something he did extremely well. And then he trusted in his best players, and that's something as a coach you can't go away from. Riley LeChance picked up 4 fouls early in the second half. He put him back in with 12 and a half minutes, and he never took him out again. And he didn't foul out of that game. So the ability to trust in his players, then again, LeChance, he missed that free throw, but got the ball into his best free throw shooter's hands. When that didn't work, ran a fantastic inbounds play to get the ball into Roberson's hands, an inbounds play that involved Toy running from half court, passing it right back to Roberson. I thought that was a great play. So I thought Drew coached this game very well. But a coach can only put a team in a position to win the game. And if he's got his guys on the line, you have to expect your guys to not miss those free throws at the end of games. And if they hit those free throws, this is a very different narrative, and I don't think anyone's on Twitter saying that Bryce Drew coached a bad game if they win this.
Absolutely not. I mean, this is just one guy who constantly tweets about Bryce Drew's job, but, who knows. And the thing that I think the biggest takeaway from this is that no matter what era of Commodore sports it is, whether it's 10 years ago with Michigan homering off of David Price in extra innings in the NCAA tournament, Jeff Green traveling for Georgetown in the Sweet 16 against Vanderbilt, the foul last year, the foul part 2 last night. The more things change, the more things stay the same with Commodore Athletics. It's still Vanderbilt. They still collapse in the end, and you just kind of are waiting for when it's going to happen. And so with that, moving on to some more bad news out of the Commodore basketball world. Prize recruit Simi Shittu was announced last week that he tore his ACL and will miss a few months of time recovering from that. However, Bryce Drew does expect him to be ready for the season either at 100% or close to 100%. Now, an ACL injury is never fun for anyone involved, and it's an injury that can really hamper you in terms of your athleticism and your explosiveness, and Shittu has those two things certainly. Are you at all concerned about what this injury could do for Vanderbilt's future this next season?
Yeah, I am concerned, and I wouldn't hit the panic button. I'd say I'm about a 6 out of 10 in my level of concern, and here's why I say that. First of all, the reason I'm not at a 10 is the timing of this injury.
Right.
Shittu has 10 months to come back before he has to play his first game at Vanderbilt. So 10 months to rehab an ACL. He's going to be working hard those 10 months. He's a very athletic guy. Will be able to rehab supposedly very fast and be able to get back from this within 10 months. That's not the thing that I'm worried about. The thing that I'm worried about is that this team next season completely rests its hopes on its incoming freshman class. And whether that's Garland, Shittu, Neesmith, and maybe Romeo Langford, we don't know. But the hopes and futures of this program are rested on this freshman class. And we're relying on them kind of being what they say they are and what everyone says they are. With Shittu, with this ACL injury, Shittu's a very unique talent. And he's a guy that I liken a lot to Harry Giles a few years ago, who came out for Duke as the #1 recruit in the country, and also a lot like Michael Porter, but I think Giles is more comparable. 6'10", power forward, runs the floor like a guard, and has extreme athleticism that is what makes him a top recruit. And when you're 6'10", and you're that athletic and running that much, that's a lot of weight you're putting on your knees. And I worry that coming back from this injury might be tough for him, a guy who relies so much more on his knees because he's bigger and because he's more athletic than so many other guys. I mean, we've seen ACL tears. We've seen guys come back great from it in all sports. I mean, guys like Jordy Nelson, like Adrian Peterson in football. But then we've seen guys like Derrick Rose and like Harry Giles who have struggled to come back for it. Giles was a better player his junior year of high school than he is right now when he's in the NBA. And so we see more and more guys struggling to come back from these knee injuries. But I will say that I wish Shittu the best with this injury, and I think he should be able to come back from it well and be 100% at least at some point next season, hopefully earlier on. But there is a little bit of that lingering concern with some ACL tears in recent years.
Yeah, and I think because Vanderbilt has never had a person like that, and then to have this happen, it's that little bit of Vanderbilt insecurity. Is of course this is going to happen to Vanderbilt, where their best player tears his ACL and is not the same after that. I don't think it should be too much of a problem. I think the fact that it happened now and not in a couple months is important because, like you mentioned, he'll have 10 months to recover before the start of the season. Even if he's not 100% ready to go the start of next season, Vanderbilt still has or will have more height and more talent on the blocks than they do this year. Correct. You're going to have Matt Ryan entering the fold now, guys like Yanni Wetzel too. You have guys that are athletic, that can hit shots, and that can take the burden off of Jerry Baptiste and Ejike Obina. And Obina has really come out of his shell a little bit this season, has looked really good. So Vanderbilt has the depth to sustain it, especially with a non-conference schedule, because before you get into the thick of things, you can maybe rest Shittu a little bit, and you'll still have some explosive guards, and you'll have some phenomenal players on the blocks. Of course, they'll want to get him back as soon as possible, but this is not the kind of injury where they need to rush him back in, and that's what I think is super important. And you mentioned we've seen guys recover from this. Tom Brady, for example, playing in the Super Bowl at age 40, tore his ACL 10 years ago or something like that, and he's been more or less fine. You have other guys like Jordy Nelson who have recovered and done pretty well for themselves. Derrick Rose, I think, is a tough example just because, well, I don't know what goes on when his
lot of knee injuries.
His knee injury,
right,
yeah, I think
he
has more knee injuries than hairs on his head or something. That's basically what's going on there. But I think this one is. I agree that it's something to watch. It's certainly not something to ignore, but I don't think it's anything that's going to ruin Vanderbilt's season next year. By any stretch of the imagination. It's certainly not going to affect Romeo Langford's decision-making at all, I don't think. Everyone thinks that every little thing that happens to Vanderbilt basketball, that Romeo Langford is watching with his careful eye,
right,
because one ACL and boom, he's going to Indiana. That's certainly the logic he's using. Give me a break.
Right. Romeo Langford is not making his decision based on Simi Shittu's level of health from day to day, especially since he'll probably be back and ready for next season, I think. It's kind of ridiculous to assume that the Shittu injury will have any effect on Langford. I mean, yeah, you said it. Most guys come back from this ACL tear pretty well. and the timing was perfect for him. I know there's never really a great time to tear your ACL. It's a tough injury, but in terms of getting his college career to a good start and being healthy when he comes here in the fall, the timing is good for him, and he will have all that time now to rehab. He won't be playing in the McDonald's All-American game or these other games later in the season, but I'm sure he would rather be healthy for the start of next season for his college career, a career that could be 9 months long, and we'll see him in the NBA soon if he's able to come off this ACL tear well.
Absolutely. Finally, after a lot of Commodore basketball talk, we're going to turn our attention to the NFL. The Super Bowl is here between, unfortunately, the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, as you could probably tell from the two of us on the set here, I'm indeed a New York Giants fan. Max here is a New York Jets fan.
The ghost of a New York
The ghost of a New York Jets fan, yes. Yeah, it was the green screen here. If you couldn't tell, we didn't time travel to circa 2006 Memorial Gym here. But this Super Bowl is making us miserable. I don't know about you, but I'm miserable over this Super Bowl. These are the two teams. If I had to pick two teams to dislike in the NFL, it's the Philadelphia Eagles and the New England Patriots. Maybe you throw the Dallas Cowboys in there, but it's just a game that if you're not from Boston or from Philly, you probably hate it. It's insufferable. It's possibly the two worst groups of fans in the NFL going head to head. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on this game? Aside from all the fans and making our lives miserable, what are your thoughts on the actual game that's going to happen?
I mean, I think this will be a good game, and don't get me wrong, I've seen enough Super Bowls in recent years and games in recent years to fully expect that the Patriots will win this game by however many points or however they pull it out. But I do think this will be a close game. I think the Eagles will probably lead throughout. The Eagles' defense is an extremely underrated defense. I mean, we talked about the Jaguars' defense. We talked about the Vikings' defense. Those defenses have gotten kind of all the hype all season. But really, when matched up last week, the Eagles' defense completely outperformed the Vikings' defense. They held the Vikings to 7 points. I think that defense will have a huge impact in the Super Bowl because the way teams have been able to beat the Patriots in recent years, and you know this well as a Giants fan, is by getting to Brady with the front four. Because if you blitz, Brady's going to easily pick up on that blitz. He's going to check it down to one of the million running backs or small wide receivers that he has that are going to zigzag up the field for touchdowns. So you have to be able to pressure with the front four, and that's something the Eagles do extremely well. So if they're able to get this pressure on Brady, then they can really affect the game. And when I say get this pressure, for 4 quarters, and especially later on in this game. Because time and again, we watch teams jump out to a lead against the Patriots and then slowly fade away as the game goes on. We saw it with the Jaguars. We saw it in epic proportions last year with the Falcons. So the key for the game for the Eagles is, can you play all 4 quarters? Can the defense get a pass rush? And can Nick Foles play? He doesn't have to play as well as he did against the Vikings. That's one of the actual better playoff games from quarterbacks in recent years. But he has to not turn the football over and make smart throws. And the Eagles can be in this game. I still fully expect New England to win this game. They have all the experience, they have all the weapons, and at the end of the day, they have Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. But I think the Eagles can really put up a fight in this game.
I think so too, and it pains me to say that a little bit, but with the Patriots, they have so many ways that they can beat you, and when the Giants won both times, you had front fours that included the names like Strahan, Tuck, Umenyiora, Pierre-Paul, absolute monsters able to get to the quarterback, and the Eagles are going to need to keep doing that. But overall, everyone thought the Eagles would be done for when Carson Wentz went down with an ACL injury, because he was phenomenal. You watch some of his highlights. I mean, he's making throws off his back foot downfield that are 100% accurate, and with the right amount of speed and power to them. I mean, he's an incredible talent, and I think he's going to be playing in the Super Bowl with the Eagles sooner rather than later. That is, of course, unless Josh Rosen decides to join the New York Giants through the NFL draft, in which case, good luck to Mr. Carson Wentz in taking on that division. Anyways, so I do think overall the Eagles are not as complete as the Patriots, and the one thing the Patriots have that no other team in the NFL has is Rob Gronkowski. he is a nightmare for any defense to cover him. Unless you have another Rob Gronkowski on the other side, you're not going to be able to cover him very effectively because in terms of size, it makes sense to put a linebacker on him. But in terms of his speed and his agility, you have to put a corner on him. So unless you have a cornerback that has the size of a linebacker or a linebacker the size of a cornerback, good luck. Because you are not going to be able to cover Rob Gronkowski. And he, I think, is going to be key to winning this game, assuming he's healthy, which it looks like he's probably going to be okay going into the Super Bowl. The worst part about this for the two of us is just the teams that are in it. You know, you can't stand the Patriots.
It's a yearly thing for me. You got to get used to it.
Well, see, for me, this is only the second time the Eagles have ever been in the Super Bowl. And that is a point of pride for the New York Football Giants. But, you know, to me it's tough because the Patriots, the Giants fans don't like the Patriots. Maybe they dislike them less than they dislike the Eagles. But Patriots are still not very high on Giants fans, you know, or nice list in some way. I mean, the reasoning I'm using, and I kind of used this last year to rationalize why I was kind of okay with the Patriots winning that game, is because no one else, aside from Mr. Eli Manning, has been able to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I thought maybe last week if the Jaguars could have pulled that out, you know, maybe it's Tom Coughlin that's been the secret the whole time and not Eli Manning. But no, it's definitely Eli Manning. And, you know, if the Patriots win this time, then there's still going to be nobody on this planet that has beaten Tom Brady in the Super Bowl aside from Eli Manning. And that warms my heart. That really warms my heart.
I mean, I can't complain both times that Eli Manning beat Tom Brady and the Patriots in the Super Bowl. I was cheering for the Giants like it was my own team in there. It's kind of the enemy of your enemy is your friend.
Yeah.
And that's the Super Bowl every year. I'm wearing a Falcons jersey last year, an Eagles jersey this year. Not actually, but if I could get my hands on one of those, I would. I'll be rooting for the Eagles on Sunday as hard as I root for the Jets in any regular season game. Playoff games don't really come around much anymore. But with the Patriots, the same reason that you hate them or that every team hates them is what makes them so great, and it's their ability to win slowly. And they're not going to cut you all at once. It's like 1,000 paper cuts. I think Alex Smith or somebody once described the Patriots as losing to the Patriots as death by 1,000 paper cuts, and that's what they do. They don't make any mistakes. And so progressively throughout the game, they'll force you to make the mistakes, and they'll complete one short pass after another short pass, and they'll move down the field and make all the plays that they need to win games. And you figure that might happen again on Sunday, especially with a quarterback in Nick Foles, who, while he's played great this season in replacement for Carson Wentz, he's not Carson Wentz. He's really only had a year and a half of great play in the NFL, and he's a backup. And so while Nick Foles might be the best backup in football, now that Jimmy Garoppolo is playing for the Niners, can he beat the Patriots? Can he make the plays in the fourth quarter that other quarterbacks just haven't been able to make in recent years, including MVP Matt Ryan last year? I don't know. And that's what will remain to be seen. But until somebody proves that they can do that besides Eli Manning, the Patriots are the team to beat in this game.
I totally agree with that. Maybe you could tape an Eagles logo over that New York Jets logo on the left side of that. It works. Maybe I don't know who's worn number 24 for the Eagles. I'm sure it's somebody good has worn it for them, given their history.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I don't know it either. One special shout out regarding the Super Bowl to Patriots defensive lineman Adam Butler, Vanderbilt alum, going for his first ring in his rookie year. I mean, what a story he's been. Hope they have good ribs up in Minneapolis for you, Adam. Good luck to you. With that, that'll just about do it with this week's episode of VU Sports Wired. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. We'll be back next week with the full crew and perhaps some more Super Bowl talk as after the game is over there. For Max Schneider, I'm Cutler Klein saying so long, and we'll see you next time.